Picture this. You're floating in open water, not a beach, open water. The kind where you look down and there's nothing below you for hundreds of meters except darkness that keeps going. Your legs are dangling. Your heartbeat is doing something irregular. And then something moves beneath you. Something large. Something that has been on this planet for over 400 million years, that survived every mass extinction event that wiped out everything else. That can detect a single drop of blood dissolved in an Olympic swimming pool worth of water, that has rows upon rows of replaceable teeth, and a sensory system so refined it can pick up the electromagnetic field your beating heart is producing right now. And it swims past you. Just past. Not at you. Past you. It clocks you with those dark eyes, processes whatever information its ancient brain is processing, and continues on its way like you were a mildly interesting piece of furniture it decided not to engage with. You surface. You breathe. You never go in the ocean again. But here's the question that should be keeping you up at night. Not the fear of sharks, but the complete logical breakdown of why that shark didn't do anything. Because by every metric of predator-prey logic, by every biological principle of a large carnivore encountering a slow, soft, nutrient-dense object in its territory, what happened in that water makes no sense. Sharks are the apex predators of the ocean. They have been for longer than trees have existed on land. They are perfectly engineered killing machines in an environment where you are a soft, slow, barely functional creature who can't breathe. Why are you alive? That question is not rhetorical. The answer is one of the most fascinating puzzles in marine biology, behavioral science, and evolutionary history. And most people never think to ask it because they're too busy being afraid of sharks to wonder why sharks are apparently, statistically, profoundly not that interested in eating them. So, here's the real story. First, let's establish the baseline. Sharks are not misunderstood gentle giants being unfairly maligned by media coverage. That framing, while well-intentioned, throws out the actual interesting truth. Sharks are apex predators. Great whites can reach 6 meters in length and generate a bite force of roughly 1.8 tons per square inch. Tiger sharks are opportunistic and will investigate and bite almost anything. Bull sharks are arguably the most dangerous purely from an aggression standpoint, capable of surviving in fresh water and frequenting shallow coastal areas where humans swim. These animals are dangerous. Their evolutionary design is oriented around finding, catching, and consuming prey. Nobody is pretending otherwise. And yet, global shark attack statistics are almost comically low for the amount of time humans spend in the ocean. In any given year, unprovoked shark attacks on humans globally hover somewhere between 60 and 100 incidents. Fatalities, actual deaths, typically sit in the single digits to low double digits worldwide for an entire year. Meanwhile, humans kill approximately 100 million sharks annually. The math of mutual threat assessment here is almost embarrassing for our species. But the low attack numbers aren't the interesting part. The interesting part is why, because those numbers exist despite hundreds of millions of people swimming in shark habitat every single year. Despite the fact that coastal waters globally are essentially giant shark territories that humans wade into constantly, wearing very little, making lots of splashing noise that in any other context would be the dinner bell. What is actually going on? The answer has several layers, and each one is more interesting than the last. Layer 1. Sharks are specialists, and humans are not on the menu. This sounds simple, but the depth of it is remarkable. Large predatory sharks did not evolve to eat anything that moves. They evolved over hundreds of millions of years to eat specific prey. Great white sharks, the most iconic and feared species, feed primarily on marine mammals, seals, sea lions, dolphins, smaller whales, and large fish. These prey animals have specific profiles: caloric profiles, movement profiles, sensory profiles. A seal is a very specific package of fat, protein, and energy, wrapped in a body shape and movement pattern that a great white's nervous system has been calibrated to recognize across geological time. A human being is not that package. Humans are lean, comparatively speaking. We have nowhere near the blubber content of a seal. Our caloric density is low. We move inefficiently in water, making strange jerky motions that don't match the movement signature of anything a great white has evolved to target. We're also quite awkward. Our limbs stick out in weird directions, we make chaotic surface disturbances, and we produce a sensory profile that doesn't map cleanly onto anything in a great white's evolutionary library of things worth eating. This is not the shark being polite. This is the shark doing a cost-benefit analysis encoded into its nervous system over 400 million years of refinement, and humans coming up short on the benefit side. Attacking something is energetically expensive. Every hunt carries risk of injury. A large shark that takes a bite of something that turns out to be a poor caloric return has made a bad investment. Natural selection does not reward bad investments. Layer 2, the investigative bite, which explains almost everything uncomfortable about shark attacks, and is far more interesting than it sounds. Sharks do not have hands. This is worth sitting with for a moment. Humans investigate objects by touching them, turning them over, pressing buttons on them. Sharks investigate objects with their mouths. The investigative bite, sometimes called a test bite, is exactly what it says. The shark is figuring out what something is. When a shark bites a human and then releases without continuing to feed, which is the most statistically common outcome of a shark-human incident that is not a shark that decided to attack a person and then felt bad about it. That is a shark performing a sensory investigation and concluding, based on the feedback from its bite, that the object in question is not worth pursuing. Human flesh apparently does not provide the feedback a hunting shark is looking for. This is simultaneously reassuring and horrifying, depending on how you think about it, because the reassuring part is sharks mostly don't want to eat you. And the horrifying part is sharks figure this out by biting you. But the investigative bite framework explains the single most puzzling statistic in shark attack data. The overwhelming majority of attacks involve a single bite followed by the shark leaving. If sharks were hunting humans, you wouldn't see this pattern. A predator that has engaged its prey does not typically take one bite and swim away. What you see instead is the behavior of an animal that bit something, received unexpected sensory information, and made a rational decision to abort. The human is the unexpected sensory information. Layer 3. Sensory complexity cuts both ways. Everyone knows sharks have extraordinary senses. The lateral line system that detects water pressure changes, the ampullae of Lorenzini that detect electromagnetic fields produced by living organisms. Olfaction so sensitive it's almost science fiction. Electroreception that can pick up the heartbeat of prey buried under sand. These senses are staggering, but here's what almost nobody mentions. Those same senses may actually help sharks identify humans as non-prey. A shark's sensory system isn't just maximally sensitive, it's also highly pattern-specific. The electromagnetic signature of a human is different from the electromagnetic signature of a seal. The acoustic profile of a splashing person is different from the hydrodynamic signature of a fleeing fish. The chemical signature of human blood, while detectable, is in a different compositional range than the blood of marine mammals that sharks have evolved to pursue. A shark's sensory system is tuned to a specific orchestra of signals. Humans are playing instruments that weren't in the original arrangement. The shark can hear us. It just doesn't necessarily recognize the song. This also helps explain why sharks in murky water or low visibility conditions are involved in more attacks. Not because they become more aggressive, but because reduced visibility impairs the visual confirmation step. A shark that has received partial sensory information suggesting something prey-like and then cannot visually confirm what it's dealing with is operating with less information than it wants. Investigative behavior increases when information is incomplete, and investigative behavior, as established, sometimes involves a bite. Layer 4. Territorial behavior is not the same thing as predatory behavior, and conflating them has caused enormous confusion. Some shark attacks, particularly from bull sharks, are territorial rather than predatory. This is a completely different behavioral mode. A territorial bite is not about food. It's about space, about perceived threat, about a communication system that once again relies on the mouth as the primary instrument. Bull sharks in particular are known for defending specific zones. particularly in murky rivers and shallow coastal estuaries. A human who enters that zone and receives an aggressive response is not being hunted. They're being warned. In the only language a shark has available. Understanding this distinction matters because it changes the entire framing of human-shark interaction. Predatory attacks and territorial attacks look superficially similar if you're the human being bitten, but they have completely different causes and completely different implications for what sharks are and what they're doing. Lumping all shark attacks into the apex predator hunting prey category misses most of what's actually happening. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. Layer 5. And this one goes deeper than biology. The ocean itself is the shark's domain in a way that reshapes the interaction. There's a concept in ecology called the home field advantage, and while it's usually applied to sports, it has relevance to predator-prey dynamics. Sharks have been the dominant predators of the ocean for so long, so thoroughly, that they have very little instinctual urgency around any given prey encounter. They are not desperate. They are not competing with other apex predators in a zero-sum scramble for food. The ocean is theirs in a way that is difficult to fully articulate. They can afford to be selective. They can afford to investigate, assess, and decline. An apex predator that is also ecologically secure is a fundamentally different animal from a predator operating under scarcity. A great white shark in healthy oceanic habitat is not a starving animal making reckless decisions. It's a highly calibrated predator operating with enormous efficiency. And enormous efficiency in a shark looks a lot like patience, selectivity, and a willingness to pass on anything that doesn't meet the threshold. Humans don't meet the threshold. Now, there's a version of this conversation that stays purely in the biology, and that version is interesting but incomplete. Because the full answer to why sharks don't eat humans also involves something that is harder to categorize. Something about the nature of predator cognition and what sharks actually are as thinking animals. For a long time, sharks were conceptualized as swimming machines. Pure reflex, zero cognition, sensory input processed directly into motor output with no meaningful cognitive layer in between. This framing justified a lot of things culturally, including the idea that sharks attacking humans were simply mindlessly responding to stimuli the way a mousetrap responds to a mouse. That framing is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Substantially wrong. Sharks have surprisingly sophisticated learning capabilities. They can be conditioned. They remember. They exhibit individual variation in behavior within species, meaning not all great whites behave the same. Not all tiger sharks operate identically. There is evidence of problem solving, of curiosity, of behaviors that require more cognitive flexibility than pure reflex allows. Sharks in captive settings have demonstrated the ability to navigate puzzles for food rewards. Juvenile sharks learn from observation. The cognitive picture is considerably more complex than the cartoon predator model. This matters for the human question because it means the shark's assessment of a human encounter is not purely mechanical. There is some degree of behavioral flexibility built into how sharks engage with novel situations. A shark encountering a human is encountering something outside its normal prey repertoire, and an animal with cognitive flexibility can respond to novelty with something more nuanced than automatic predatory engagement. The fact that sharks frequently choose to leave human encounters rather than escalate them may reflect, in some small part, a computation about the situation rather than purely mechanical reflex. This is speculative at the edges, but the direction it points is clear. Sharks are not mindless eating. Machines, and their restraint around humans is not an accident of programming. It is, in some sense, a choice, even if that word feels strange when applied to a fish. Let's address the white elephant, or rather the white shark, that has been swimming around this entire conversation. The attacks that do happen, the fatalities, the real and terrible instances where a human being went into the ocean and didn't come back. What do those tell us? They tell us that none of this is absolute. Sharks are not operating on a universal policy of human non aggression. Under certain conditions, poor visibility, mistaken identity, territorial provocation, proximity to an active feeding event, environmental stress, individual behavioral variation, sharks do attack humans in ways that go beyond investigative bites. People die. This is true, and it matters. But even the fatal attacks, when examined carefully, almost always reveal conditions that diverge from the baseline. Surfboards from below in low visibility do present a silhouette remarkably similar to a seal. Divers spearing fish carry struggling, bleeding marine animals that activate predatory responses accurately. The shark is responding to prey signals, and the human is simply too close to the source. Swimmers in the water during active feeding events, near fishing activity, near seal colonies at dawn and dusk, these are the conditions where the probability curves shift. The shark is not targeting humans. The shark is responding to a situation in which human presence has introduced prey-consistent signals, or in which territorial boundaries are being violated, or in which the conditions are unusual enough that normal assessment fails. The human is, in most cases, contextually adjacent to something a shark actually wants, not the target itself. There's something almost melancholy about that when you think about it. People have died not because they were hunted, but because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time relative to a chain of events that had nothing to do with them. The shark wasn't after them. Circumstance put them in a position where the signals added up wrong and the outcome was catastrophic. The ocean doesn't have malice. Neither does the shark. Now pull back from the individual encounter and think about the evolutionary timescale, because the deepest answer to this question operates at a level that makes individual encounters almost irrelevant. Humans as a species have been swimming in the ocean for a very long time. Our relationship with the sea is ancient enough that some researchers have proposed a semi-aquatic phase in human evolutionary history, though that remains controversial. What's not controversial is that coastal humans have been fishing, swimming, diving, and building their lives around the ocean for tens of thousands of years. Indigenous communities across Polynesia, Southeast Asia, East Africa, and elsewhere have been freediving in open ocean, in reef systems, in channels between islands, continuously and in large numbers. Shark attacks on these communities, while they do occur, are not so frequent as to have ever meaningfully limited human presence in the ocean. If sharks were systematic predators of humans, the anthropological record would look very different. Coastal communities would not have built ocean-dependent cultures. The risk calculus would have forced different choices. Instead, what the long view shows is a pattern of coexistence. Not peaceful coexistence in some idealized sense, coexistence with risk, with occasional terrible outcomes, but coexistence nonetheless. The ocean has never been uninhabitable for humans because of sharks, despite the fact that the ocean is entirely the shark's domain. That's remarkable. That's the thing nobody says out loud enough. Humans have always been able to use the ocean despite it being full of apex predators that could theoretically kill us. And they have done so because those apex predators, for reasons written into 400 million years of evolution and ecology, are not in the business of hunting us. There's one final dimension that deserves space, because it reframes the entire thing from a completely different angle. Sharks may not kill humans because, from a certain perspective, we are extraordinarily dangerous to them, not dangerous in a bite force way. Dangerous in the way that only one species on Earth can be. Technologically, systematically, at scale. Sharks are ancient. They predate dinosaurs. They have outlasted every extinction event on record. But in the last 100 years, human commercial fishing has done more damage to shark populations globally than any extinction event in their 400 million year history. Overfishing, bycatch, finning, practiced specifically for the shark fin soup market, have collapsed populations of numerous species. Some estimates suggest that certain species have declined by over 90% in the last 50 years. 50 years. Against a background of 400 million years of unbroken survival. Sharks are not afraid of humans in the way prey animals fear predators. But the ecosystem level consequence of human activity has been more devastating for sharks than any predator they've ever faced. The species that doesn't need to hunt us has been hunted by us to the edge of functional extinction in ocean after ocean. This context transforms the question. Why didn't the ocean's deadliest predator kill humans? Takes on a different weight when you realize that the relationship, measured across history, has flowed in the opposite direction. The deadliest thing in the ocean, measured by sheer body count across species, is not the shark. It never was. It's us. And somehow, knowing that, the moment in the water at the beginning of this story, the shark that swam past, feels different. Not like the shark was being merciful, not like you were lucky in some random way, but like you were encountering an animal operating according to rules that were written long before you existed, rules that happen to exclude you from the prey category, while your species has been systematically working to eliminate it. The shark didn't choose to leave you alone. But something much larger than a single choice made that moment possible. 400 million years of evolutionary specificity, ecological security, sensory calibration, behavioral sophistication, and sheer biological coherence that adds up, in practice, to an apex predator that passes you by. The real question isn't why the deadliest predator in the ocean didn't kill humans. The real question is what we're going to do with the knowledge that we are, by any honest accounting, far more dangerous to them than they have ever been to us. And whether that changes anything about how the next 100 years plays out for an animal that has survived everything except our attention. The shark swam past you. Whether your species returns the favor is still an open question.